look at a big brand like US Bank as an example, right? They don't have a branch manager or an employee at every branch doing their marketing at the unit level. That would be wildly inefficient and very costly to do, and they're not a center of excellence. The corporate headquarters are. And that's our mentality, is let's remove that off of your plate. So we use an omni-channel approach here. There's a mixture of centralized media and some ground level advertising that a franchise owner will do as well. But not only is it more efficient, it's more cost effective. And without getting into all the nitty gritty, we're able to drive down the cost of leads for our franchise owners dramatically because we are centralizing it, and those vendors are working directly with our corporate media team on behalf of our franchise owners. So our owners really, it's a big value coming into a system like Happinest. You know, I've got a really solid franchisor with great relationships that are taking this off of my plate.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Conquer the Mind podcast. We're no longer keeping track of episodes now that we've done so many. But I'm very excited for today's guest, who's honestly done a couple rounds of doing different podcast episodes. So we're going to really dive into some interesting topics, provide some value for you guys. So Eric Martin of Happinest Brands, thank you so much for joining me today.
Josh, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I watch your show religiously, and it's an honor to be on here with you. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate you tuning in. So if anyone ever finds value, always like, share, comment, subscribe, help out the algorithm. We always greatly appreciate that over at Conquer the Mind. So a little bit about Eric's background before we dive into the podcast. So as you can see, he's the Vice President of Franchise Development of Happinest Brands. He just started off in sales. He got into medical sales, like a lot of people kind of in that medical sales, pharmaceutical sales industry, kind of make that transition into franchising. So really want to touch on that, Eric. I know you dove into some senior care concepts before diving into Happinest Brands. And for anyone that doesn't know what Happinest Brands is, it's a portfolio of 5 different home service brands, from Lawn Doctor, Mosquito Hunters, and now Humbug Lighting, EcoMaids, Elite Window, and Cleaning Sparkle Squad. Did I get anything wrong there, Eric?
You got them all there, Josh. We have Lawn Doctor, which we'll talk about as kind of the Happinest Brands bell cow. Then we have become acquisitive over the last several years, bringing on Mosquito Hunters, which is now Mosquito Hunters Humbug Holiday Lighting. It's a multi-service brand now, which we'll talk about. EcoMaids is our cleaning concept, residential light commercial, that was acquired officially in 2019. And then we've more recently in 2022 added Elite Window Cleaning, which is in Canada. And then the sister, kind of the mirror of Elite Window Cleaning, is Sparkle Squad, which is the US brand here that does window cleaning, gutter cleaning, house washing, and pressure washing services as well. So a lot of home service concepts here in the nest.
And we'll definitely dive into it, but I know one of the specialties of Happinest Brands is kind of looking for those brands in those early kind of emerging brand stages and then acquiring them as part of that Happinest Brands portfolio. So I'm super excited to dive into that. I want to also touch on, to start the episode, with Lawn Doctor, because this is really unheard of in franchising. They started off in 1967 with their first franchise owner. They're one of 3 brands on the Franchise 500 for the entire 44 years of publication. The only 2 other franchise brands on that list are McDonald's and Dunkin Donuts. So you really can't think of any other bigger franchise outside of that. So I'm really excited diving into Lawn Doctor. Everyone knows McDonald's, Dunkin Donuts, but maybe they don't know Lawn Doctor. So we're going to dive into the history of Happinest, Lawn Doctor. So I'm very excited. But Eric, to start off the episode, I know, like I said, you were in sales, medical sales, and then you started to make that transition to first senior care in franchising. Can you dive into what that transition was like, going from corporate America? You know, corporate America sales to franchise business development is very different from like the typical sales process. So what was that transition like for you?
I appreciate you bringing that up. I don't often think back on it too deeply, but I think we all learn different things throughout our career, pick up different skills, engage with different people. I learned very early the importance of consultative sales approaches, longer term sales approaches. So when I was in medical recruitment, I'd establish relationships with clients and then work with potential people looking to transition jobs and move around the country, and I'd help them find the right fit. And those processes take a long time. So I never considered myself a sales person. I considered myself an advisor. And I think as a prospective franchise owner, you got to look at your career and kind of the skills you've amassed. Are you good with working with people? Are you high energy? Do you like to build relationships and offer solutions to problems, try to find the ideal match or fit and work people through a really engaging process? And that helped me a lot getting into my little world of franchising, which is in development. But if you get into franchising in any way, shape, or form, especially in the service space, you're going to be involved in sales to a degree. Certain franchisors have resources, and we'll talk about some of ours here at Happinest that really help accelerate growth of a franchisee's business at the unit level through media and demand creation, and then maybe a sales process or sales center. But you have to work with people. You work with folks that are interested in your service, and you're also dealing with referral sources at the local level as well. So I look back on my career and a lot of different things that I have done prior to getting into franchising, but like many, I fell into it. Franchising kind of found me. I didn't find it. I wasn't like you, Josh. Like, I know you grew up in the world of franchising with your father, who's been a highly successful executive in franchising. You saw what that looked like and had a bit of a path probably. I myself did not know anything about franchising. I knew McDonald's. I knew Dunkin. Yeah. I didn't know much beyond that going back 15 years ago. So I've learned a lot in that 15 years, but I think a lot of those early stage experiences helped me. And I think you have to look at it as a candidate looking at a franchise. What are some things that I may be bringing to the table that could help my success here following this plan and path a franchisor laid out for me?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think just the idea of it being more of a consultative sales approach is definitely really what it is within franchising. You can't even buy a franchise if you were interested that day. You really legally have to wait at least 2 weeks. So there's no way to literally like sell someone on the spot. Like, it really is educating people so that they can get all the information to see, does that in the end of the day make sense for them? And I think that I like the point on families and franchising, or kind of falling into franchising tends to be the joke in franchising. What's so cool in my opinion about franchising is just the ability to reinvent yourself, whether it is, your second career, your third career, your fifth career. You see so many people on like that next stage of their career, looking for that next stage of their career, not really sure what to do. And then they fall into franchising, then they get the next generation involved in franchising, the generation after that. You very rarely see someone get involved in franchising and then leave the franchising community, as you're kind of talking about all these different paths to success. So Eric, as you did make that transition to franchising, what were kind of like those early stages of the learning curve, if you will, for someone that knows nothing about franchising, maybe they're considering? Were there any kind of like early things that happened as you were making that transition that you think would be helpful for someone that's maybe thinking about franchising?
I think early on in my career, I thought people, how they shopped for franchising, it's different than I think today. Okay. In other words, I think when you come to that fork in the road, whatever that moment is for you, if you're just burned out or you feel like there's not the freedom or flexibility, or you're just tired of the corporate game, people take a step back and say, what else is there for me potentially? You've amassed ideally some wealth. You've amassed some skill sets. You're someone that could do other things, but it's more of, I want to be on my own. I want to create my own path, create an asset for myself. So that's kind of the first moment, is meeting somebody where they are. When I talk to candidates anymore, I try to figure out, what stage in life are you in? What season are you in? Are you running to something else? Or are you running away from something else? And that's a big difference, right? So number one, it's trying to figure out, from my perspective, working with candidates, what stage of life are you in? How serious are you about investing in yourself? And do you have the resources to truly be able to do that? But from a candidate's perspective, Josh, I think it's different. People start, I think, early shopping like a consumer. Whether it's, I like these products, or I could see myself, I really like working out at this type of place. Maybe I should own one. Or I love the food here. Maybe I should consider bringing a franchise to my particular area. It's not the right way to look into franchising. There's different attributes that you need to be scoring. Ideally, you're looking at the investment to start with. What can I really truly afford and have additional capital to reinvest into over time to grow my business? What is my role day to day with the customer, with referral sources, with my business in general? What's the scale and the potential of this particular business I'm getting into? Does it kind of fit into my goals? What's my relationship to the customer day in and day out, right? You have to understand these certain things, because a lot of folks think of franchising like a McDonald's, like a Dunkin, a bricks and mortar. And those are very capital intense investments that can take years upon years to recoup potentially. Different type of investment versus maybe a home service concept where you're more directly involved in influencing the success of that business day in and day out and working with customers. So you have to really kind of step back and think, what do I want this to look like? What is my role? What is my function in the business? Can I afford to do this? And can I see this growing? Do I see this filling a void or a need in the marketplace versus shopping like you're looking for, a car as an example? This is a month to two at minimum process for people to research a franchise concept to figure out if it's a good fit. So you want to start early by scoring attributes, figuring out those things I kind of touched on, and then delving into the process of research, knowing that there's a good opportunity potentially if things align. So it's just something I learned early. It's a different way to look for a business versus maybe looking for material things that you're shopping for as a consumer, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And Eric, I know, kind of listening to you before, you talk a lot about candidates thinking about franchising to reverse engineer the process, kind of think with the end in mind. What do you think about, as you mentioned, kind of running to something or running away from something? Do you think there's like a, one preference there? Like, do you need to be running towards something? Or if you're running away from something, can you still have success? Or, because I guess the reason why I asked, if you're running away from something, I kind of look at it as you're avoiding something, but you still don't really know what that kind of vision is. So you're not really knowing exactly where you're going. You're kind of just going through the motions. Would you say, what is like the best way for a candidate to really reverse engineer that process and kind of start with the end in mind to have success?
It's a really good question, Josh. And I would prefer someone running to something different. In other words, we all work with folks that are burned out of corporate America. And it seems to be, in my experience doing this for years, is something bad happens. You know what? This is the time I'm really going to start looking at this. I'm just tired of it. Probably not the moment. Like, it requires some thought. You got to begin, as you said, with the end in mind, reverse engineer. Like, what am I looking to accomplish in the next 5, 10, 15 years? You really have to come into, in my opinion, into the franchising process, if you're serious about it, looking at this long term. Nothing happens overnight. Investing into a business, being involved in the growth of that business, it takes time to build something to a point where it's positively cash flowing, it's profitable to the franchise owner. You have to come into it with that longer term vision and an established why. I call it the North Star. What is the goal? What is the reason you're looking to change your life and take on potentially more upfront with less coming in those very early stages of development? So you have to have a compelling reason to kind of push you through. So if someone just has a bad day and says, I'm going to start looking into something else, and they stumble into franchising, we're catching that individual probably at the very early stages. There's probably a few more bad days and a few more steps and a little more self-reflection before that individual is truly ready to start looking into franchising as a next step in their career. So when I say running away, doesn't mean that corporate doesn't want you anymore and you just got to get out of it. It's really establishing that vision and that why, and making sure coming in, this is going to take some time. This is going to be a lift. I need to be in the right mindset and have the right vision to really get into this and make this successful, because everything takes longer than you think. As we well know, to be successful in business ownership, you want to come into it with that right mindset.
That's really interesting, Eric. I appreciate you sharing. And I really like the idea of the North Star. I'm very big on, you're very lost in life like I was a couple of years ago until you figure out that North Star, that mission, whatever that why statement is that kind of keeps you going. And yeah, I just think it's really interesting when you talk about running to something or running away from someone. I'm curious, as a franchise developer, there's a lot of candidates. Fridays, Saturdays, we're on Monday. A lot of candidates over the weekend, they have a beer or two, a cocktail, then they request information on franchising, but they're kind of not really, they don't really know what they're running to. They're kind of just maybe going through, running away, if you will. So how, when you're on the phone on that initial call with a candidate, how are you figuring out whether it's someone that's kind of running away from something or running to something? How do you kind of help that candidate evaluate kind of their why? Because I know it's like the hardest thing to figure out that mission,
Sure.
that why. How are you kind of helping candidates kind of think about that bigger picture?
Well, my advice to any candidates listening to this is, number one, when you come into the process with a franchisor, be prepared to open up your personal doors. We need a visual into your current stage in life, your family, what you've accomplished, the resources that you have. We're not going to make decisions on any one call, but it's going to lead to a second and a third and a fourth if that initial kind of stage goes well. I look at franchise development as kind of a dating game. If you think about how you meet a significant other in life, it usually starts off with, a drink or maybe a light meal, something like that. You're getting to know each other, and that turns into a second date, and then a third date, and eventually you start to get to meet the friends, and eventually from there you start to meet the family, and then you make sure your goals are aligned, and then at that point it turns into a real relationship that may go somewhere. It's no different when you're looking at a franchise, right? It starts off with that early stage of kind of having the beer talk, as I say, making sure that we understand your reasons, your why, kind of what you have accomplished, what you're looking to do, and that might turn into a dinner. And that's more of a stage of like a business model review and going through the economics and talking through maybe the disclosure material, getting a little more serious. And then it's kind of meeting the friends. You start talking to franchise owners of a brand and get to know, what's the culture like of this system from your perspective as an owner, and how does this work, and you feel like you're getting good value? And then from there, what's the next step in a relationship, Josh? You're meeting the family. That's meeting with the franchisor and then really establishing trust, and there's a good synergy. So all of these steps take time. As I said earlier, it's usually a month or two for people to really flush it out, do their due diligence. But early, you got to open up to a franchisor. So I'm asking questions about background, experiences, what have other employers that you've worked for felt about you? Have you led teams? Have you had success in your career and grown your departments? And I'm looking to see, is this someone who's a winner? Is this someone who's really, truly shown success in their career? I want to see if that may translate into franchisee success. So if someone's unhappy or always falling down that ladder, never gotten those opportunities, I can't get along with people very well in corporate America, so I'm going to do my own thing. Well, our feathers don't change much. When we get into our 30s and our 40s and our 50s, we kind of are who we are. And if you're successful in corporate and you're looking to create your own kind of destiny and build your own success in business, there's a really good chance that's going to translate. But if you haven't, it's probably not going to be all that much different, candidly speaking, as a franchise owner. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, is fit, match, feel. Is this someone I think could be a really good addition to our system? Are they bringing some arrows in their quiver along with them from their corporate experience that can translate to success in the franchise world?
Yeah, no, I think those are really great points, Eric, especially, it really is a key to note that it's a two-way interview street for anyone considering franchising. I think a lot of candidates come in saying, I'm throwing 50, 100,000 at something. What are you going to do for me? But really what you're doing is providing an opportunity based upon what they want to do with it. So, some people, that's why there's top, middle, bottom performers. You're giving that same opportunity to people, but what are you making of that opportunity? And especially nowadays, there's so much going on. There's a lot of distractions. You talk about that 1 to 2 month timeline. How can candidates, when they hear 1 to 2 months to maybe figure out what I'm doing, how can a candidate decide, like, I'm going to invest my time, I'm going to commit my time to that 1 to 2 month process with that open mindset? There's so much 9 to 5, you're taking care of your family, your kids have sports games, whatever it may be. How do you tell yourself, I'm going to commit the next 1 to 2 months, and then in the end, maybe it's for me, maybe it's not for me? How does someone go through that process with an open mindset?
Well, I think it comes down to the season in life someone's in, right? So what we have in life, there's tons of competing interests, all the things that you listed. But as we all know, when we're serious about something, it tends to rise up in the list of importance. So again, that's a part of the discussion we'll have early, is this is we'll call it the process. And it's not always 1 to 2 months. I've worked with folks that take over a year to figure out if this is the right situation. We've had some move maybe a little more aggressively if they're in a place in life where they can do that, but we have to make it a priority. And I think early you establish that relationship with the prospective franchise owner and say, these are the things that we're looking at. We want you to follow these steps. As you know, in franchising, it's all about duplication of systems and best practices and having a model to follow. It's no different in the development process. It doesn't take years to figure out if a franchise is a good fit. I call the research process kind of in the early stages the scratch and sniff phase. Everyone's doing that. We're sizing each other up. And I know folks that I'm Zooming with or meeting with on the other end of the phone are probably talking to several others like myself, no different than me. We're trying to figure out, are we a good potential fit based on the criterion we're looking for to carry this process forward? And if this is a priority for you, let's make it a priority. And we'll be flexible and work together. We have different ways that people learn, different reviews that we'll do, materials that we'll share, that we'll do debriefs on and go through. But what I look at in this process as each time we take a step, it's either a step forward, and if it's not, it's a step back and more than likely out, right? So you're always going to be moving progressively at each step of the way, getting a little more information, digesting it. We talk a lot about how do you eat an elephant? Well, it's one bite at a time. You can't do it all at one bite. It's impossible. So you really got to be, as a candidate, committed to the education process, the evaluation process, but show your franchisor that you're taking the necessary steps and following that, because that's what we're evaluating as well as a franchisor. How well does this person kind of follow steps and direction? Because that's going to translate. If we do agree to align together and partner and have you come on board, it doesn't change. You're always working backward, as you know, as a franchisor. Things are always evolving. There's different changes and iterations in all franchise systems. You have to be pretty nimble, but you have to follow that lead of that franchisor. So it's important early that we're seeing signs of that with a candidate and just openly talking about it. This is our process and this is our expectation. You know, we have some questions that we're going to ask up front to figure out if this person's in the right place. But I hope that provides some kind of help in my thought process, at least.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. And that's something I often hear from, candidates. It really is that 1 to 2 month process, but are you getting more and more excited at each step of the process? Because if you're not getting more excited, it's often, a good sign that it's not the right opportunity. And that's why there are thousands of opportunities, and one great opportunity for one person may not be the same great opportunity for the next person. Everyone has a different skill set. So the goal in franchise is to take that current skill set, figure out how we can best leverage that into the proper franchise opportunity. So I think those are really great points. Just if you're thinking about franchising, although it is that 1 to 2 month process, it doesn't have to be 2 months. If you go through the first couple calls, you're getting mad, you're not seeing it's a cultural fit, because overall, the franchisor, that's going to be your support system. Especially, it's really easy to make money in an easy economy. Everything's going up. The stock market's going up. But, an election cycle where there's more uncertainty, having that support system so that you're not in business by yourself, but you have this community of hundreds of other franchise owners, especially in Happiness. You literally do have hundreds of other franchise owners, as well as the franchisor that is continually improving that system. So now I really do want to dive into Happinest Brands. I know, Eric, you transitioned to Lawn Doctor, which was, the flagship brand of Happinest Brands. Can you dive into how did Happinest Brands evolve? How did it get started? Was, Happiness first, or was Lawn Doctor first? The chicken, the egg? How did that story come down?
Yeah, it was Lawn Doctor first.
Okay.
So you're going back, as you said earlier, to the late 1960s. And that's really when franchising, the foundation of franchising, was getting started. Franchising was around, but it wasn't like it is today, right? So Lawn Doctor began out in the East Coast, New Jersey, and really became very quickly well known in that particular area, and grew, exponentially. We've grown over the many years we've done this now to hundreds and hundreds of locations coast to coast. But Lawn Doctor has amassed literally thousands of years of collective experience with its leadership team, support coaches, now franchise owners that span decades. We've got some multi-generation franchise owners at Lawn Doctor where they've taken over from grandparents and parents and continue to run these businesses. So it's a blue chip brand, a top 5% brand in terms of locations around the country and size. We're number one in the lawn category, and it's just an incredible brand. Now, it started there, and really that was it. Lawn Doctor for many, many years. I joined the company about 7 years ago. And what we did as a leadership team is took a step back and said, we've got so much to give, you know, in terms of technology, centralized media, a sales center, years of experience in home services. We understand the customer avatar. Really, home services in general, there's various widgets, whether it's lawn care or pest control or painting or home cleaning or window cleaning, gutter cleaning, etc. They're all very similar. It's how the customer experience is developed. It's how you have your sales processes and bundling and upselling of customers. It's your communications to your customers and your employees. All of those things apply to brands that we get into. So we said, as a company, we can really help emerging brands that may want to someday look more like Lawn Doctor, accelerate their growth, accelerate their learning curve, and become a nationwide brand, tapping into the resources that we had built for Lawn Doctor. So without going into all of the history and the details, we figured having a brand, a platform, if you will, to allow emerging brands that had a great founder, an SME that knew that space inside and out, had a handful of locations that wanted to accelerate that growth, could plug into the mothership of Happinest. And we have, like I said earlier, thousands of years of experience. We can help those brands grow much more aggressively, but grow correctly, grow responsibly, do it the right way with all the knowledge that we've amassed over the years. So it started with Mosquito Hunters in 2018, and then we acquired EcoMaids in 2019. And as I said earlier, Elite and Sparkle Squad officially came into the family in 2022. But brands like this that are emerging, that have white space, are attractive, but they don't necessarily have the resources to become hundreds of locations at that point. And they don't have the knowledge or wherewithal to do that. So by plugging into Happinest, we can attract a higher caliber of candidate, help that group and that founder grow and become a household name brand much sooner, because they wouldn't have the resources. And just to, as an example, vendors that we work with at Happinest, they're working with hundreds and hundreds of franchise owners. These are vendors that wouldn't have a conversation with a 5, 7, 10 location system. They will talk if you're part of 1,000 or more locations like at Happinest. So it gives those emerging brands advantages, buying power that a lot of other brands that are kind of smaller, independent, or just trying to get off the ground would never have. So that's really what Happinest is, an accelerant for a brand that has a great leader, a great system in place. And it has to be a good fit for us as well, Josh. We have various things that we score as a company. We're looking at various categories that we want to get into. This is not the end of the story for Happinest. We expect to have 12 to 15 service brands in our portfolio. And this isn't tomorrow, over the next 10 to 15 years, but it's got to be a really good synergy and fit for our business and our system and our model as well. So a lot of those things have to align, but we really want to underscore this point. We really like founder-led systems. We want that SME, because we're not experts in pest control. We're not experts in cleaning services. We're not experts in window cleaning, but we have those teams and experts that have the advantages of Happinest behind them, so they can grow those brands the right way and create something that's wildly successful over a period of time.
No, that's beautiful. And I always say that's kind of like the beauty of franchising in a really good franchise system. You have a really successful business. You have a CEO, a founder. He knows the business in and out. You know, he's probably devoted the last 5-10 years, his life, true passion to that business. And then he has the courage. I say courage because most people, they don't know what they don't know. Then they take in the franchise experts to take that successful business and now become a successful franchise. Because a lot of times you see a very successful business and then they themselves, they just keep their marketing director, their operations guy, and you realize no one on their corporate team knows anything about franchising. And that's a really big red flag for a candidate or really anyone looking at franchise opportunities, because these really are the best of both worlds. And franchising is like its own business in and of itself. You know, everything's so different between having that business and then once you start to franchise it, your life's going to change. No longer are you focusing on how to get more pest control clients, but how are you finding business owners to help those pest control clients? So I think those are all really great points. And I think it's really interesting that you find those emerging brands that have built that successful business. And now you're implementing some of those Happinest brands, resources, tools. And that's something I really want to dive into with Happinest. I think a lot of candidates one of the biggest things that they're concerned about outside of ROI, the cash flow, the investment, but lead generation. You're making this big investment into a business. Where are your customers coming from? Where are your clients coming from? And Happinest Brands has really taken a different approach with centralizing some of these resources, centralizing the lead generation tools. Eric, can you talk about what was that original change like between when you were using all these other vendors for lead generation to when you started to centralize it? What was that decision-making process like and the impact been?
Yeah, so I'll start kind of high level. There's kind of two different flavors. There's a centralized model and then there's a decentralized model. So we still work with vendors that are best in class for things like pay-per-click or meta advertising or display or retargeting, direct mail. Those are some of our sources for creating impressions and lead generation from a kind of a centralized standpoint. But if you're decentralized, you're asking your franchise owners at the unit level to become a center of excellence, to manage everything else that has to happen day in and day out at the ground level with hiring and customer management and creative, and all of those things are a lot, including having a life in your family to deal with as well. We looked at it and said, we can take that off of the plate of a franchise owner, manage it at the top of the house. Owners are still funding their marketing each year and getting reported on daily. We use a BI tool that shows our franchise owners all the data they need to see and work with our franchisees on that. But by taking that off of their plate and our marketing team working directly with vendors, not only does it free our franchise owners up and remove the complexity off of a unit level operator who really should have no business in doing digital advertising. That should be handled at the top of the house. You look at a big brand like US Bank as an example, right? They don't have a branch manager or an employee at every branch doing their marketing at the unit level. That would be wildly inefficient and very costly to do, and they're not a center of excellence. The corporate headquarters are. And that's our mentality, is let's remove that off of your plate. So we use an omni-channel approach here. There's a mixture of centralized media and some ground level advertising that a franchise owner will do as well. But not only is it more efficient, it's more cost effective. And without getting into all the nitty gritty, we're able to drive down the cost of leads for our franchise owners dramatically because we are centralizing it. And those vendors are working directly with our corporate media team on behalf of our franchise owners. So our owners really, it's a big value coming into a system like Happinest. I've got a really solid franchisor with great relationships that are taking this off of my plate. So I can really focus on what the most important thing is in my business, which is hiring the right people, delivering a great service, and having customer retention and being able to grow those relationships through nurturing at the local level. That can't be centralized, right? So when you think about the customer experience and journey, it's the most important thing on the front end. A lead form comes in, a call comes in, you've got minutes to close that. You've got minutes to engage, build confidence, give a quote, get a customer set up, get a credit card on file and into a system. From there, as a local franchise team, you've got to nurture that relationship going forward. So that experience is managed from the lead generation and creation of interest to conversion. Now our franchise owners need to step in and cultivate that relationship further, which is why we lead the industry in many of our businesses in retention, because they have the time to do it, to focus on those things locally. So that was really the impetus of this. We'd been doing it for Lawn Doctor for years. We knew it would work well for our other emerging brands as well. And look, Josh, you and I both know blue collar spaces like home services, there's a lot of independence in there. We run this in a very white glove experiential way, and it really separates a Happinest brand from maybe that local mom and pop that just can't move as nimbly in this world that we're in, this Amazon, Uber Eats world where marketing and tactics change literally daily, it seems like anymore. You've got to stay on the cutting edge of that, and you've got to make sure your customers that leads are coming in are being converted and they're getting a good experience. We're able to run this in a very white glove, white collar way from the beginning of that experience for a customer all the way through, and giving our owners a chance and their teams to deliver that experience because they're free to do it. And that's really what drove all of this, is looking at just the moving parts. How can we better help our franchise owners be relevant, get the clicks and the impressions and the conversions, and give them an opportunity to outshine everybody else in their market because they can provide that great local touch and customer service because they're freed up to do that.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. You have franchise owners, they make this big investment. they want to ramp up the business. They want to break even as quick as possible. So getting as many tools as possible to help them generate those leads. And as you talk about, digital marketing changes every single day. It's a space that I'm in. It changes literally every single day. Pay-per-click, SEO, Google AdWords, it's always changing. So it really is a separate business in of itself with marketing. So having a franchise owner do both of those is just, like you said, it's not really that possible to have all those different structures and not really use your time wisely, your money wisely. And I know about like 6-7 years ago with Happinest Brands, you guys took control of the media fees, some of those vendor management relationships. And one of the key points I think is that you're helping them save a ton of money. When you're a candidate, you look at this marketing ad fund where the franchisor is, forcing you to pay this money on a monthly basis. But that is just so that the franchisor can use these targeted marketing strategies to help you continue to generate leads and build your business, so that rather than trying to start your business independently, you're kind of guessing where your customers are going to come from. But with Happinest Brands, you guys had the track record since the 1960s. You guys are going to figure out where those customers are and then how to target those customers. So I think those are some really big points. And Eric, just when you're in kind of like starting independently versus kind of investing into a franchise model, one of the things you touched upon was kind of that speed to lead. How like you guys are measuring the metrics, I know. How important is that like on an ongoing basis? And can a mom and pop like compete with those franchise models, or how do you kind of go about evaluating both of them?
Well, could a mom and pop compete? Certainly, if they have resources like a Happinest Brands have, and I don't think many do. They just don't have the kind of the buying power to do that, as you kind of touched on earlier as one example. If you're investing in the media, as you should be to build a business, you're going to pay media fees. Right. And if you're a standalone independent, the fees that you're paying are going to be in some cases triple or quadruple just for oversight to that particular vendor. And you're not even certain if that vendor, unless you're very knowledgeable in digital advertising, is providing you value, because you can get a lot of clicks and a lot of impressions and not have a lot of revenue to show for that. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at not only cost of lead, but cost of acquisition of customer, annual value, and lifetime value. We talk a lot about CAC to LTV here at Happinest Brands, and what is it costing us to get a customer, and what does that value look like long term? That's got to make sense, right? And we can show that to our franchise owners. So again, I look at our mentality here at Happinest is we want to out local the national guy and out national the local guy, right? So we have the best of both worlds, where we have national brands, national resources, but we've got local boots on the ground, local teams that care, that are in those markets, that are engaging in networking activities and doing what we call ground game. It really is a two-way street, Josh. As you well know, being in franchising for years, marketing has evolved, but one thing stays true. It's not a linear process. People are going to see a lawn sign in a door hanger, a piece in the mail. They're going to see an ad pop up on Facebook or Instagram. They're going to Google see reviews. They're going to have an ad pop up. They're going to be retargeted it. They're going to see a display ad. That's how this works. You're going to see a vehicle driving around in their neighborhood at one point and say, well, these guys are in our area. I've seen them a lot of places. It's called the rule of sevens. You have to make 7 impressions, and you got to get there efficiently to get customer preference and buy-in. So that's what we're looking at as a company with all of our brands, is how can we accelerate that for a unit level operator to get those impressions and get that buy-in from their customer base. And as a local independent, the other thing that we didn't touch on is you don't have that fraternity. All the resources we're talking about, from media management to call center management, controlling that experience and freeing you up, that's great. But as an owner of a business, imagine what it would be like to have no one else to talk to that's doing what you're doing as you're trying to figure out a very complicated path. Well, we figured out the path. We have a model that's proven to work, and we have a lot of franchise owners that are executing upon that you as an owner, a newer one, can tap into and say, hey, I'm curious, when this comes up, what have you done historically? Oh, that happened to us in year one as well. We got right past that. Here's what you do. Having that fraternity is priceless as a franchise owner. So you'll never get that as an independent. And frankly speaking, the reason why independent businesses tend to fail at a much higher level than franchise owners is they don't have the resources. They don't have that fraternity in place. So they run out of time and money before they figure out that model. They step on too many of those landmines, and that's what a franchisor helps you avoid. Doesn't make you great. I will be very candid with anybody I work with. Businesses are built and scaled to a degree of that owner's ability. A franchisor can get you to a spot of being profitable, understanding the business model, giving you resources to grow. But if you're going to go from a nice business to a multi-million-dollar operator, that's because you're a pretty good business owner and you're bringing some skill sets to the table as well. So that's the reality that I've seen over the years in franchising. It doesn't make you this, seven-figure amazing franchise owner. You're going to get there with your own two legs, tapping into the resources of that franchisor.
Yeah, those are really great points. And I know our time's quickly winding down with about 10 minutes left, so I know you'll have to go soon. And I'm trying to figure out how to best wrap up the last 10 minutes, because I think those are really great points with candidates. If you invest in a franchise, you can very easily replace your corporate America income with that franchise investment opportunity. But I think, as you're alluding to, those generational wealth opportunities come from you scaling that business, getting to the next brand, that next unit. So you can definitely reach all your income levels through that single unit. But as we're kind of alluding to, it's an opportunity, and seeing what you make of that opportunity. Like my father personally, he made that transition, investing into a single unit dry cleaning franchise, and then scaled that to 4 units. And that's where you really start to see those generational wealth opportunities. Our life easily changed when he made that first investment into the single dry cleaner. We're going to Disney World, we're taking family trips, he's working for himself. That's really where I saw everything change. But once you start to see he has that asset, that true control, he's implementing general managers into the store, all these kind of entrepreneurial skills. We call it franchipreneur in franchising, but that's where you really start to see things change. So I think those are really great points. And as a lot of candidates, sometimes they're thinking, I'm limited on income, I'm limited on scalability. And one of the points first I want to touch on is collaboration that you're talking about. Why does collaboration help franchise owners, and eventually when they want to sell, that exit strategy? Why is collaboration so helpful? Whereas some franchise owners might see, there's a guy in that nearby territory. Are we competing with each other? Or what's like the real mindset in a good franchise opportunity, like Happinest Brands?
Yeah, the dynamic of franchisees, whether it's within the system, like if it's Lawn Doctor owners, or it's Lawn Doctor and a Mosquito Hunters, or a Sparkle Squad, or an Eco-Maids in their general area, we get better every day as information comes in. We've had ideas come from, emerging brands that have helped Lawn Doctor. We've had ideas from Lawn Doctor certainly help our emerging brands kind of have some shortcuts and skip over some things that didn't need to go through as an emerging brand. So it goes two ways. We work together. There's a lot of synergy. But I think as you look at kind of your specific question to like an exit strategy, like when you look as a franchisee candidate, and if you're buying a resale, you're not only buying that business and evaluating that P&L and that particular franchise owner's business, you're also evaluating the system and seeing, wow, this is a multi-brand system with lots of opportunities and growth potential. They do it the right way. So, when you're working with other franchisees in your system, they're not competing with you. Everybody has territories that are defined, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 or more, but they're certainly collaborating together and helping each other. And that brings value to a franchise owner, not just in their growing stages to learn and kind of shorten that time frame to profitability by learning some additional best practices, but also on the back end, the valuation stage, where a candidate sees, wow, this is a multi-brand company with thousands of locations. It brings the value of your business up, the better that your neighboring franchise owners do. And there's always those opportunities, as you know, in franchising to, acquire a neighboring franchisee. Everything we start in life, there's a definitive end to it at some point, right? So whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, as you build your business, you get to know your neighbors well. There might be a newer entrant that wants to grow and be more aggressive, and it's your time to move on, maybe exit and do something different or retire. That's a great story. We see a lot of, transitions or transfers happening internally, which is a great story for our system. It's great for our franchise owners. So you want to get to know your neighbors quite well and create some working relationships that can only serve to help you as a franchise owner.
That's really helpful, Eric. And I really like that point of just the collaboration of the system. And one thing I think a lot of people don't think about is you're evaluating the whole system. Although you're in business for yourself, the whole system matters. So that's why they have a franchise agreement. A lot of candidates are like, it seems a little one-sided. Well, it's meant to be one-sided to protect you in case the next franchise owner is not following that agreement. That hurts your business. That hurts your exit strategy. So I really love those points, Eric. I think that's something under the rocks that people may not always be considering. And as we're kind of diving into the scalability in your territory, Happinest Brands, I think to kind of end down the episode, unfortunately, I wish I could go another hour with you, Eric, but Happinest Brands, it's really about having a lot of eggs in the nest, as you guys kind of allude to with that metaphor. Do you see a lot of opportunities for people to grow through different verticals, whether it's adding a second or third unit, a different brand? Is that kind of one of the big powers of the home service brands, or what do you see kind of in your system between the franchise owners and that scalability?
It absolutely is a part of our vision, Josh. We're at the very early stage here with Happinest. Really, over the last several years, we've evolved and gotten on the radars of many people and have added some really incredible brands that we want to make sure have a good foothold and setting. But you better believe part of our discussion with the candidate early is, what is your long-term vision? Do you have a desire to maybe be a multi-unit franchisee and grow maybe horizontally? Or do you maybe have a desire to grow vertically and maybe add another brand or two over time at the right time? It's very important I underscore that. Anyone listening to this that has a desire to be a multi-brand, multi-unit operator, that takes time. We want to make certain the primary business you have has a really good foothold, a good team in place, established, profitable, growing. At that point, maybe you at the local level can look to do something similar that we're doing centrally, is add another brand, leveraging those resources. So as you know, and as I know, home services, our approach has always been at Happinest to begin with a manageable start, 1 to 2 territory locations. Let's go deep in that before we get too wide. Let's create synergy, density, route efficiency. A lot of our brands there's a pretty frequent cadence that we're seeing at customers. So route density is really critical in the success and profitability of a home service concept. Make sure that's in the right place before we look to grow further or possibly grow up. But we really like this part of our business and the opportunities that it will present to owners to have that vertical growth. And really double down in the areas that they own and leverage those efficiencies that they've created for their primary business. But I expect someday to see several multi-unit, multi-brand operators within Happinest Brands. We're already seeing some of that in this earlier stage.
That's awesome, Eric. And I want to I know we talked about for candidates early on, reverse engineering the process, kind of starting with the end in mind. Do you talk to candidates up front about, adding the second unit or the second brand, or is it something where you kind of see how much success they have with that first unit, then they start to add, or do you kind of see it go both ways?
Typically, we would start off by focusing on a singular brand, right? Okay. And that might be a multiple unit discussion within that brand, but we're not looking at the earlier stage to have someone do 2 at the same time. That's drinking from 2 fire hoses immediately, and that's an awful lot to take on. So it is discussed as a growth strategy, but something we're comfortable with early is a brand and potentially talking about the units that would encompass that particular brand. And let's see how that goes. Shame on us in franchising, candidly. If we take someone very early and have them take on too much, the last thing we want to do is have an average owner of 2 or 3 businesses. We want to make sure that we have a really good, strong franchise owner of a primary, and then from there, adding on another brand when the time is right and have 2 really good brands. We don't want to strip that individual's ability to scale. That would be very hard to do right out of the gate with 2. So that's a longer term discussion, but we do have it because we want to know, a franchisee coming on board, what is your goal, and can we help you position yourself toward that goal over the next several years?
No, that's really powerful. And really, whether it's franchising, you talked about relationships earlier, it really just comes down to, I think, reverse engineering your whole life and starting with the end in mind, whether it's at 5 years, 10 years, what do you want your life to look like? And then you can take each day and work towards that goal. I think that's why a lot of people, we feel kind of lost in the motions because we don't necessarily know what we're working towards. So I really like the point of reverse engineering. And I know our hour has wound down, Eric. So if you have to go, feel free to go. I usually do like a very brief summary to kind of wrap up the episode.
Please do.
All right, awesome. So my kind of big takeaways from the episode today were, one, just the evaluating of the system. I really like that idea. I think You think about the McDonald's, the Subway, the Taco Bell, whether you're in the United States or China, like you're going to get like a very similar experience. It's because of those systems, those processes. And what's very unique about some of those opportunities like McDonald's, they put you through like a year-long training program. So it really just goes down to the systems, the processes. A lot of candidates, they're wondering, why do I have to go through the training? Why do I have to fly to another state to get trained? Why does it take 1 to 2 months? Because the best franchise opportunities, it's all about the systems, the processes, and ensuring that each brand, each experience, whether you're in Massachusetts or Los Angeles, having that same experience. And it all comes down to building the infrastructure, the support, the resources. And with Happinest Brands starting in the 1960s at the start of franchising to where we are today, it's a really, really interesting advantage for that newer home service brand that gets acquired as part of Happinest Brands to kickstart these lead generation tools, these kickstart programs to ramp up your business. The other tool I really liked is the rule of 7 impressions that you mentioned. Especially nowadays, it could even be like 15 touches, and marketing just gets more and more complicated. So allowing the corporate structure to take care of that and handle that so that you can focus more on the boots on the ground, the local marketing, and really not focusing on the pay-per-click, the SEO, which, as we're learning, is a job in of itself. Being able to centralize those resources so that the franchise owner can focus in on their business. They have families, they have obligations. You're not trying to answer the phone every time someone calls, like a consultant type role. You want that business that grows while you can still live your life. I also like just the generations in franchising, getting that next generation involved, the next generation after that. And I think it really goes down to reverse engineering, really what you're looking for, getting your family involved. And then as you're going through that process, preparing to open up. I think a lot of times people are like, I'm throwing 50, 100,000, whatever it may be. What am I getting? But it's really that two-way street. If franchisors didn't need franchise owners, they would just go like the private equity route and raise money. But they really do need these two-way partners to help them form these businesses. And then lastly, you talked about kind of scoring your attributes and really kind of figuring out what's important to you, whatever it may be, whether it's financial, lifestyle, family, figuring out what's important to you and what opportunities will get you there. I think everyone faces that fork in the road that you mentioned, Eric. And, whether it's a good fork in the road, a bad fork in the road, we all face these moments in our life where we have these big decisions and it can change our life for the better or the worse. But the cool thing in franchise is that you don't need to make any decisions. You have a 1 to 2 month process to really gather all the information, speak to people that have made that same investment, and in the end see, does that make sense for you? And the goal is that it's really a no pressure situation. It's really just giving you all the information so that you can see what makes sense for you and your family. Eric, do you have any kind of final points that you'd want to touch for the viewers?
First of all, Josh, that was a fantastic summary. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad we stayed on to do that. I would add to that just what I've seen over my years in terms of attributes of success of a franchise owner. And it's not a specific skill set or background or experience that is surprising to some. What I will say is, number one, a successful franchise owner is coachable. They check the ego at the door. Yes, we know as a franchisor, you would not be here unless you've been successful in what you've previously done, but you're embarking on something new. So check everything you know at the door, come in and be prepared for coaching and be prepared to take that coaching on. That's number one, okay? Number two, the ability to consume information. We all consume information, but in this world we're in, all the changes that happen and digital advertising and sales approaches and marketing, all of that, it changes so frequently. Yeah. You have to have the ability to consume a lot of information and be nimble, willing to change and adapt over periods of time. Third attribute is being decisive. You're making a lot of decisions as a small business owner each day. Some are pretty big, and I would say there's 2 or 3 really big ones in a year that you're going to make as a franchise owner. A lot of them are pretty small daily types of decisions, but you got to make decisions sometimes based on less than 80% information. All right? If you can get 60, 70%, in many cases, that's good enough. You got to make the decision. So being decisive. And from there, a willingness to delegate and be strategic. You talked a bit about it just in our call today with marketing as an example, the sales process. We have great tools and resources for that, but it goes down to the unit level as well. Hiring people that will coach you on to bring onto your team at certain points in time and moving yourself up that organizational chart. You can't be in the weeds with your business for too long. You got to get out of that shadow and outsource and bring people on around you that are good to help you grow your reach and scale of business. And finally, I will say just a general comfort in being uncomfortable. I see that out there quite a bit now in the franchise talk. I've said it for a long time. There are things you need to do as a business owner that you may in your head at any point in time think, I'm not sure this makes sense. Why is my franchisor telling me to do X, Y, and Z at this moment in time? There is a method to this process. There are things that we've learned over the years that have to happen strategically, but as a franchise owner, you've got to put yourself out there, especially in home services. There's a lot of networking involved in power partnership creation, ways that we do organic lead gen and local brand awareness with grassroots ground game tools. You got to put yourself out there and engage in that. If you see some of those attributes in yourself as a prospective franchise owner and have a comfort with that, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be a good fit for someone in franchise. And keep that open mind and obviously bring those skill sets to the table.
No, that's really powerful, Eric. And I think I love the idea of the coachability index, which is really based upon, one, your willingness to learn. So being able to say, yes, I don't know this, so I'm going to learn this. And then second, what is your willingness to change? Because you have to be giving something up to be able to have that coachability index. And, if business ownership, if franchising was easy, everyone would be reaping the benefits of having this asset, producing cash flow, living life on their own terms. So it does come with some time investment, some commitment up front to be able to reap the benefits of business ownership. But our goal is to help educate you. And I think one of the key points, Eric, that you were kind of alluding to is you have the mindset with everything, then you can really conquer anything. So I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up the Conquer the Mind episode today. Eric, I had a really great time. I could go another couple hours with you. So I appreciate you joining me today.
Josh, it's been my pleasure. Let's do it again sometime, man. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I'd love to. Thank you, everyone. If you haven't already, like, comment, share, subscribe, help out the algorithm, help us get this value to other people that are interested in business ownership, personal development, because I always say business ownership is like the greatest journey of personal development out there. And it's changed my life. It's changed my family's life. So I'd love to educate people and see, is it right for you and your family? So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week.